Off the northwestern coast of Africa, not too far from its mainland, lies an archipelago known as the Canary Islands. This chain of islands is home to some striking landscapes. But what catches the attention of many scientists and experts around the world is a particular volcano that has the potential to become one of the most dangerous on the planet. Located on the island of La Palma, this volcano poses a unique risk. Surprisingly, the danger doesn't lie primarily in its eruption itself, but rather in the catastrophic aftermath that could follow. A massive landslide crashing into the ocean, sending a colossal wave hurtling across the entire Atlantic Ocean. This wave, a so-called mega-tsunami, could potentially barrel straight toward the east coast of the United States. The thought alone sounds like something out of a disaster movie, a full-fledged doomsday scenario, but it does raise a pressing question. What would happen if a mega-tsunami hit New York City? Let's dive into the details and see how this grim possibility could unfold. In recent years, the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events and natural disasters have only increased, making us wonder just how chaotic things could get in the future. Disaster scenarios have existed in human imagination for centuries, but recent history has shown us that sometimes these once far-fetched ideas can edge closer to reality. Mother Nature, in her unpredictable and relentless way, remains a force to be reckoned with. Among the many types of natural disasters, tsunamis rank among the most terrifying and destructive. However, there exists something even worse: the mega-tsunami. The very name mega-tsunami suggests a disaster on a scale that eclipses regular tsunamis by a wide margin. The sheer magnitude and force of such an event make it almost unfathomable. Many of us remember the devastation caused by the 2011 tsunami in Japan. The earthquake-triggered wave ravaged entire cities, claiming thousands of lives and wreaking havoc across the coastline. Similarly, just a few years earlier in 2004, the world witnessed an even more destructive event when an earthquake deep in the Indian Ocean triggered a tsunami that spread death and destruction across several countries, affecting hundreds of thousands of people. These events were caused by the shifting of tectonic plates beneath the ocean floor, resulting in massive waves. In contrast, a mega-tsunami is triggered by an altogether different kind of event, one that is both sudden and violent, involving an enormous amount of debris plunging into the ocean all at once. A prime example of this was the 1958 Lituya Bay mega-tsunami in Alaska. A staggering 30 million cubic meters of rock, weighing an unfathomable 90 million tons, tumbled into the bay, creating a wave that reached an astounding 1,720 feet high. Events like these, though rare, are reminders of the scale of destruction nature is capable of unleashing. The idea of a mega-tsunami crashing into the east coast of the United States sounds like the stuff of nightmares. So, what exactly could trigger such a disastrous event? The source, according to researchers, lies far away from American shores. Dr. Stephen Ward, a renowned geophysicist at the University of California, has conducted extensive research into this scenario. His conclusions are both eye-opening and deeply unsettling. He posits that the epicenter of such a tsunami would not be anywhere near the U.S., but rather thousands of miles across the Atlantic, off the coast of Africa. Specifically, it would originate from a massive volcanic structure known as Cumbre Vieja, located on the Canary Islands. At first, this might seem like an improbable source of danger for those living on the opposite side of the ocean. After all, the Canary Islands are relatively remote, and for many years, Cumbre Vieja lay dormant. However, in recent years, this dormant volcano has shown signs of activity, sparking concern among scientists and raising questions about the potential for a catastrophic eruption. Fortunately, the recent eruption did not result in the collapse of the volcano's western flank, which would be necessary to trigger a mega-tsunami. But as history has shown, volcanic eruptions are unpredictable, and there's always the looming possibility that a future eruption could be much more violent. If and when such a catastrophic eruption occurs, the entire west side of Cumbre Vieja could break away under immense pressure, sending a massive section of the island, between 38 to 500 square kilometers of rock, crashing into the Atlantic Ocean. At this point, you might be wondering, how could a volcano so far away from the United States cause devastation on the American East Coast? The answer lies not in the distance, but in the sheer size and power of the wave that would result from such a massive landslide. Dr. Ward has calculated that, depending on the size of the landslide and the speed at which the rock enters the ocean, a wave of unimaginable proportions would be generated. This wave, traveling across the Atlantic Ocean at speeds of up to 300 miles per hour, would take approximately 9 hours to traverse the 3,300 miles that separate Africa from the eastern seaboard of the United States. That might seem like a long time, but when it arrives, the impact would be nothing short of catastrophic. When this mega-tsunami finally reaches New York City, it's estimated that waves as tall as 60 feet could smash into the coastline. To put that into perspective, New York City, particularly Manhattan, sits only about 33 feet above sea level, meaning that even a relatively small increase in water levels could spell disaster for the city. If the city were hit by a 60-foot wall of water, it would be engulfed in minutes, submerging streets, tunnels, and entire neighborhoods. Those who happen to be outdoors, whether in cars or walking along the sidewalks, would have mere minutes to find safety, and only those able to reach higher ground quickly would have any hope of survival. The city's famed skyline, with its towering skyscrapers, might stand a better chance against the onslaught, but even the most resilient buildings could face severe damage. Older buildings, particularly those constructed decades ago, could crumble and be swept away in the torrent. The streets, filled with debris, cars, and even buses, would turn into lethal channels of rushing water, carrying everything in their path. As the wave engulfs the lower levels of buildings, those inside would be forced to flee upward to avoid drowning. Emergency services would be overwhelmed, with helicopters being the only viable option to rescue people stranded on rooftops. However, given the sheer number of people trapped in the city, the rescue operation would be painfully slow. And the devastation wouldn't be limited to New York City alone. This mega-tsunami would impact the entire eastern seaboard of the United States, from Maine to Florida. Coastal cities and towns all along the coast would face the same fate as New York, with thousands of lives at risk and billions of dollars in damage. In the immediate aftermath, the U.S. government would undoubtedly spring into action, deploying resources and aid to help those affected. But even the most well-prepared response might not be enough. The financial markets, both in the U.S. and around the world, would likely take a massive hit, as New York, the world's financial hub, lies in partial ruins. A global economic collapse could follow, plunging the world into financial turmoil. Given the scale of the destruction, would this tsunami rival or even surpass past tsunamis, such as the one that devastated Japan in 2011? It's hard to say with certainty. While the death toll from this hypothetical disaster might not reach the same levels as past events, primarily due to the advanced warning systems that would give people time to evacuate, the widespread damage across the entire East Coast could make this one of the costliest disasters in history. The time it would take for the wave to reach the U.S. could give millions of people the chance to flee to higher ground, which could save countless lives. But the sheer force of the wave, combined with the densely populated nature of cities like New York, Boston, and Miami, means that the damage would be on an unprecedented scale. It's easy to let your mind wander into the darkest corners of such a terrifying scenario. But before we get too carried away, it's worth noting that while the possibility of a mega-tsunami hitting New York City exists, it is extremely unlikely. The Atlantic Ocean is vast, and even if Cumbre Vieja were to erupt in a catastrophic manner, the wave generated would likely lose much of its strength before reaching the American mainland. Additionally, the advanced warning systems in place today mean that millions of people would have ample time to evacuate. As we've seen with past eruptions, including the recent one at Cumbre Vieja, the worst-case scenario doesn't always come to pass. For now, it seems that this doomsday scenario remains firmly in the realm of possibility, but not probability. In the end, while it's fascinating and somewhat frightening to contemplate such a scenario, there's little reason for panic. For now, the chances of a mega-tsunami striking New York City or the East Coast are slim, and with modern technology and preparedness, the impact of such a disaster would be mitigated as much as possible. Let's just hope that Cumbre Vieja remains quiet, and we never have to find out firsthand what it would be like for a mega-tsunami to strike the Big Apple. If you enjoyed this video and are curious to explore more fascinating yet terrifying scenarios like this one, click the link on your screen now. Thank you for watching and we'll see you in the next one.